formidable robot.
There's no doubt in my mind you are aware of the infamous corpse model from Half-Life 2. If you're not aware, the texture for the model's face was that of an actual burn victim sourced from a medical textbook. When everybody who was a fan of the game found this out, they simply couldn't help themselves from discussing it. Can't say I blame them though. Plus there's also the beta textures for the fast zombie, which is theorized to be an autopsy photo, though nothing is confirmed. Though if I were to tell you an even more nauseating instance of this sort of practice, you would probably think I'm insane. Or maybe not. Maybe you even want to find what I'm about to describe deep in Valve's servers. Don't. It doesn't matter how brave or desensitized you think you are, it's not worth it. I was part of the team for Left 4 Dead 2. After Turtle Rock Studios was bought by Valve, they decided to expand the team significantly. My role was a character modeler, though after what transpired, I quit and remained uncredited in the final product. Full disclosure, I have no ill will towards Valve. But the individual this story centers around has a psyche like a shattered mirror, and I wouldn't doubt for even a minute he would try to threaten my safety if he were to find out I'm telling you this. So the man behind the madness. I would love to tell you who this guy really was, but due to some legal stuff, I'm not allowed to disclose his real name. I'm already skirting a fine line even telling this story publicly, so for the sake of this, I'll call him Ryan. Not even a minute after he first walked through the door, everybody in our office already felt something was off about him. He was a lanky pale guy. His age was hard to pin down, he could have been anywhere from 16 to 30. Some other features included dark brown stubble that went all the way down to just above his Adam's apple, perpetual bags under his eyes, and a general air of uncleanliness and filth. He had been brought in as a texture artist. Needless to say, nobody liked Ryan. But he was allowed to stick around, as he hadn't technically done anything truly wrong. He was only on the team for a week or so, but it felt like months. But the first thing that truly weirded me out was when I gave him an early model of a common infected to work with. Now the concept art and the model I made for it looked almost identical to the final product. Merely just normal people with green skin and some signs of mutilation. But when Ryan sent me the textured model, it was not at all what I was expecting. The overall build and outfit wasn't touched, but the face was where the similarities to the final product ended. The face was pale, and compared to the rest of the textures, was grainy and surprisingly amateurish. I could feel the deep brown eyes boring deep into my soul, and the mouth that hung ever so slightly open didn't help. Everywhere the skin of the infected was exposed, it was a pale almost transparent color, to the point I could see the veins pop out like the eyes of a mouse that was caught by a cat. Naturally I was confused. I went to confront Ryan about what the hell this was about during break. "What the hell did you do to the model?" Ryan flinched, as though I had caught him doing something he wasn't supposed to, despite the fact all he was doing was standing by a water cooler. He quickly tried to compose himself.
"Oh, okay.
"What did you do with the infected model I gave you? I did give you the concept art too, didn't I? What's with the new design?" Ryan paused for a second, before he chuckled in that disgustingly high nasally tone that everyone in the workplace had grown weary of.
"Oh, that. Yeah, he sent me the art, but we lost all."
"Yeah, but it's what the artists came up with, and it's
like hell I'm gonna be working on such generic designs."
"Ryan, I don't care what you think is generic, it's your job to
"Piss off."
I didn't feel like getting fired for beating up a co-worker over something trivial, so I bit my tongue and continued the rest of the day in relative silence. But I decided to at least tell the higher-ups about Ryan's behavior. They said they would look into it, and that was that. After that, he surprisingly attempted to actually clean up his act. He would still submit textures that were totally off from what the artists had envisioned, but they were simply alternative versions which were presented alongside much more accurate ones. But everyone else who was doing the textures for the game was growing increasingly scared of Ryan. Of note being this one guy who apparently vomited when he glanced at his creation of the spinner's textures. Now I had seen his work for that monster. The alternate design had swollen bruises around the eye, no teeth, and exposed guts hanging from its stomach. Admittedly, while his other designs unnerved me, the spinner's was the only one to truly disgust me in execution. Something about it seemed wrong, perverted. I get we were designing zombies and that was kind of the point, but admittedly Ryan's texture work really shined when it came to his more grotesque interpretations of the infected. It looked like I was staring at an actual atrocity that was once a human being. So given that one employee's reaction during the texturing process, I just had to know what had happened to disgust him that bad. So I snuck into his cubicle with another employee, just in case what we saw was just that bad that we would need some morale or reassurance to get us through the rest of the day. We checked the computer and there were the standard programs he would need, alongside some randomly assorted folders for stuff like fabric, leather and other clothing materials. But then we noticed a folder labeled, used for parts. My co-worker double-clicked the folder to see what was inside, and the contents nearly made us retch our stomach out through our mouths. There were files upon files of real people who were in horrific conditions. Some were already dead, but some were just barely clinging to life. The worst part was recognizing the parts that Ryan had used. A man with his knuckles breaking through the skin and covered in blisters, he had used it for the hunter. That name and word alone reminds me of that Spyro character. A victim of gangrene, whose rotted limbs he had used for the charger's arm. And the spinner. Jesus Christ, the spinner. Trying to recall half of what he had used would make me waterboard myself with acid to forget about it. The most I can tell you is that one of the things coming from the stomach wasn't an ordinary internal organ. It was an umbilical cord. We immediately panicked and contacted the higher-ups to have them learn what Ryan had been doing. But they refused to fire him at first, instead opting to simply rework the textures he had already done. But with some more pushing over the course of the remaining work hours, we finally convinced them to get him off the team. He was later confronted and fired, which he obviously didn't take well. Ryan went off raving about how Valve work hours, and couldn't appreciate the reality of his work. He even attempted to assault one of the staff members, but was restrained and escorted out before he could. Now I know what you're thinking. What happened to him? To tell you the truth, I have no idea. I only ever knew him on a first-name basis, and I couldn't find anything in the news about a mentally ill Valve employee being fired over having a folder of gore on his computer. Everyone else from what I could gather refused to even mention Ryan's name, and simply referred to that folder as the nightmare folder. Presumably to disassociate from Ryan. But if I do find anything else out, I will be sure to let you know. One more thing. If you think this nightmare folder is some tall tale that I'm making up to frighten you, then I want you to do something for me real quick. Go to YouTube and find an upload of the developer's commentary for the game, and skip to around 7 to 8 minutes in. I think what you'll find will be rather curious.